One more time, please.
Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Check
7.
1, 2.
We are in the war room discussing the Tennessee law that's now before a higher court, and you want to know what's going on with that.
Here's what I want to know. I just found it really interesting to see coming across my news feed, the Supreme Court of the United States finally kind of taking on head on what can only be described at its core as a transgender issue, or you could say broadly LGBTQ rights, but I don't think so. This is much more focused on a transgender issue, such a cultural hot point in this country right now, at the center of the culture wars in this country. But what's going on? And the Supreme Court is taking this issue on. Tell us, what's up?
Let me simplify for you.
Go for it.
Without getting into politics, we're going to analyze this strictly through the lens of the law, right? And the law is basically what's fair, what's not fair. So I'm not going to get into the politics of it. I'm not political anyway, as you know. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm the guy in the stands, the legal lawyer, the lawyer that's in the stands watching everything and analyzing. And I'm going to tell you what I see, what I believe is going on. But before I do that, Tony, I want you to know I'm a criminal lawyer, but I do a lot of constitutional law because that intertwines, it intersects together.
Yes.
Like, for example, when a person gets arrested, some rights are violated, like search and seizure rights, right to an attorney, right to bail, all sorts of other rights. So
which come from the Constitution.
Comes from the Constitution, the paper that the four founding fathers put together. And there's rules, right? And some of the rules are you got to be fair. I mean, the Constitution, from my understanding, is just fairness, fundamental fairness. Remember that in law school?
100%. And my two favorite classes were always criminal law and constitutional law, particularly because they're so focused on just driving behavior, like human behavior. Like, what can you do? What can't you do? What shouldn't you do? What do you have the right to do? What's a fundamental right that you have? And what's not, where the government can come in and block you and stop you. It's interesting.
And doing the right thing and the morally correct thing and what makes sense for society as a whole. So here's what's going on. Here's a breakdown. The long and the short of it is that there are many children in this country that disassociate with themselves, with their sexuality, or what they've been assigned, their gender assigned to them at birth. So there's an incongruity going on, and that's what it says in this motion. Tennessee is one of 16 states, I believe it's 16 states, that are banning gender-affirming care. What does that mean, gender-affirming care?
It might be up to 25, by the way.
Okay, maybe 25.
That's half the country. That's
so what is gender-affirming care? Essentially, it's care for those that have what in this motion is called gender dysphoria. It's a disconnect between what you were assigned with when you were born, your gender identity, and later on you disassociate yourself with that gender identity, and it becomes so bad that you develop these feelings of anxiety, feelings of depression, and in some cases suicide. Essentially, you don't identify yourself as the person that you were born to be.
Right.
And you want to change that. So this is an extreme thing. It's not saying that what I thought was initially that, anybody could go in and just get your body parts chopped off. That's what I thought this law was about. I was very ignorant as to that at first. But that's not what this law is all about. And that's what's being politicized. I mean, the way they're politicking this is really bad.
Well, let's look at what it is at its core, though.
Right. So what it is at its core is they're saying, look, there are people with gender dysphoria. It's a mental disorder. And for these people to be better, to feel better about themselves, let's give them what they want. Because care. It doesn't matter that we're blocking their hormones, because sometimes those same treatments are done with people that aren't transitioning. For example, they give hormone therapy to young children for different reasons. And for women also, they give certain therapies for ovarian cancer. I think they give some testosterone or estrogen therapy. So the law is basically saying, wait, they're saying if this case where it's filed against, it was basically LW by and through her parents, Samantha Williams versus Jonathan Scrutiny, they're asking to the courts to say, wait a second, why is it fair that other children could get testosterone therapy and estrogen therapy, but our children who have problems with identifying with themselves, who are miserable identifying themselves, who could actually commit suicide because they don't want to identify with their gender identity that they were assigned.
Well, with their
at birth.
biological sex. With their biological
With their gender assigned. That's we're going to get into that. You're using an old terminology, and I'll get into that.
Okay,
So
well, I have
gender
a question. I have a question.
Well, before we get into that, before you get into that question, what's important to put out is that now what they're saying is, since you're giving these two individuals, the males and the female, normal males and females, treatment therapy, why can't these children that have issues with their own gender identity get the same type of treatment?
Okay.
And that's under the Equal Protection Clause. They're saying you're violating our rights.
Okay.
So far, go ahead. Tell me if you have any
Correct
questions.
me if I'm wrong, but the way I understand it is that when a child is born, there's a biological sex. That's either XY or XX.
Well, okay,
that's a biological sex. That's
So I'm not going to get into that because
No, I know, but I want to be clear what we're talking about.
we're specifically.
Can I talk?
Yes.
Okay. If I may, a child is born with a biological sex, and gender dysphoria, as I understand it, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've read the DSM-4. My wife was a licensed clinical social worker. I do get it.
Okay.
Gender dysphoria is when a child's sense of their own gender identity, we can put a pin in what gender identity is, but a child's sense of gender identity does not conform with their biological sex, which is their sex assigned at birth. That's what gender dysphoria is. That means if you're born a male, RJ, you're born a male, it means you have an XY chromosome, you're a boy, right? Nobody will contest that you're a biological male. Everybody agrees on this. It's just sometimes, in some percentage of cases, we know it's pretty low, but it's a tragic thing that happens when the young boy who's born biologically a boy perceives themselves more as a girl. Their identity aligns more with the gender we call female. So there's a disconnect with their gender identity, which is an idea, and their biological sex. That's called gender dysphoria.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in those cases, several states have passed laws, right? Like I know Tennessee, Texas, was Kentucky one of them, a handful. I'm going to say as many as 25 when I read about it this morning that basically ban the ability of doctors to provide certain kinds of care, right, to children who have this issue. Is that correct?
I think it's 16 states.
Okay.
Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee,
I
South
could be
Carolina,
wrong.
Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arizona, Utah, and Idaho.
Okay. And because I saw the number 25, but I could be wrong. It could be wrong. Somebody might have.
The other states haven't really decided on it. They're gray areas.
Maybe they're considering these bans.
They haven't
perhaps.
banned it at all yet at this point.
So that's what we're talking about is like these states are saying, hey, in these instances where these children have this issue, which we talked about as a disconnect in their identity and their biological sex, you're not allowed to do certain treatments, right? You're not allowed to. They banned those treatments.
They're not allowing hormone blockers.
There's 3 classes of treatments I saw, like hormone therapy.
That's the major one.
That's a big one.
That's the big one.
Puberty blockers.
Right.
That's another one.
Right.
And then the most extreme one, which is going to get people the most riled up, surgery.
Which is, according to a pediatrician, an endocrinologist, and again, as a criminal defense attorney, I defer to the experts in every single case. I'm not giving you my opinion regarding this. I'm telling you what the experts are saying. And I've done my research regarding this. And there's a doctor by the name of Meredith McNamara, who is from Yale University. She's an assistant professor in pediatrics. She specializes in adolescent medicine. She cares for youth aged 11 to 25 and supervises pediatric residents at Fairhaven Community Hospital. She deals with a youth facing complex trauma and high-risk social situations such as this. She's involved in medical education initiatives. She has a degree from Chicago. She's a medical doctor and a master's in clinical research from Emory University. The list goes on and on. This is the person, one of the 18,000 endocrinologists that are in this motion that are basically saying that the odds of somebody getting a mastectomy or having
surgery side of things?
the surgery it's like 0.0001. It is so minute.
Okay.
It is so small. Under the age of 18, it's extremely small.
Okay.
Extremely. And you need also, there are safeguards to this. What I think the society is thinking is that a child could go in and just get their breast chopped off.
Mutilated.
That can't happen without safeguards. You have to go through psychiatry therapy, psychological therapy. You've got to go get doctors, a board to go and make these recommendations. Your parents got to agree. And there's years of therapy that you're doing, hormonal therapy, and there's still mental therapy to get to that level of the mastectomy and removing your body parts. There's so many things that have to happen.
There's safeguards in place.
It's extremely rare, and in my opinion, again, I'm not politicizing this. I think that people are making a political issue about this because it maybe happened in one out of, I don't know, a million cases, if that, whatever it may be.
Right.
So they're politicizing it. But the reality is the majority of the children that have gender dysphoria, that's the reality, the crux, the big one. Those children are saying, look, I can't go to school. I don't want to go to school. I want to hide. I want to kill myself. The parents are saying, please, obviously, we would like our child not to have that dysphoria.
Right.
But instead of our child committing suicide, can you please give him the puberty blockers? Because we would like him alive.
Right.
That's what this case is about.
Okay. So that's going to be one. Are we talking about the laws that various states passed that banned the treatments?
Yes.
So should we talk about a particular state, or should we? I have questions.
Yes.
Like, my questions are: if all these states are banning these treatments, how do the parents feel about it? I mean, obviously these parents are upset, right? A lot of these parents are part of these lawsuits that are now going to go all the way up to the Supreme Court of the U.S. saying, "Hey, I want my kid to do this."
Well, according to Dr. McNamara and myself included, I believe that there's a lot of misinformation or misunderstanding about what's going on. A lot of people think that, again, that when the parents are blocking this, they're thinking that we don't want our child to go in there and get surgery without us knowing about it. So that's wrong information. That's not going to happen. The child can't do that. Over 18, yes, because at majority level, they could do whatever they want. They conduct their own process at that point. But under 18, the parents still are involved, Tony. So they're not going to be able to go walk in and just get their breast chopped off. And at 99% of the time, that doesn't happen. What happens is the child feels depressed, anxiety, doesn't want to feel that way. And these hormone blockers stop their breasts from growing, which makes them more depressed because they can't identify with their breasts growing anymore. Some of these males like to sit down and urinate because they can't identify with standing up and urinating. So they're acting as if they're the other gender. They're acting because they identify with that gender. And all they're saying is, please stop these things from growing. It's making it a lot worse for me. Right. I don't see myself in the mirror as this person. Please help me. Right. Now, whether you and I agree with it, that's a different issue. All the parents are saying, we have a right to decide to do this for our children. Right. And the government is stopping us. And where the legality comes in, here's what the parents are saying. So it's okay for other children to get hormone therapy, but not ours because you don't like it in your culture and you believe in your society children shouldn't get this because of whatever mores that you have, whether it's cultural, whether it's religious, and so forth. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the Equal Protection Clause, what is that? They're saying basically these children should be analyzed under heightened security. Heightened security means, as you know, if you're being discriminated against race, religion, ethnicity, creed, the law says you can't do that. Now, these trans children are saying we should be a part of that group of protected classes. Right. Just like if you were black, just like if you were gay, just like if you were religious. Mm-hmm. We are a class that's not protected, and we should be protected just the same as a regular straight kid, whether it's male or female. So that's what this law is about. In my opinion, that's my interpretation of the law. Does that make sense?
Well, when you say the law, I'm not sure what
I'm sorry, in my interpretation of what they want the law to be in this complaint. They're asking for injunctive relief, which means they're asking for the courts to stop this practice of blocking the states from giving hormone therapy and allow the parents to make that decision and allow the doctors to make that decision.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
My question actually was not whether the parents are upset that the kids will go to the doctors on their own. My question, I said the parents are upset that these laws are being passed banning this treatment of their children. Yeah. That's actually where I'm going with it, which is that a lot of the parties who have joined this complaint, which has now made its way up to the Supreme Court, are the parents of these children.
Yes.
So people should be clear about that the parents are on board with this treatment. Just like you said, the parents are saying, hey, it's our right to treat our children the way we want with whatever tools we have. Puberty blockers, hormone therapy, probably not surgery, although in
99% of the time, not surgery.
Very rare cases, which are maybe we can't wrap our heads around and are really weird, but not really mainstream in any way.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that all makes sense. It just, the question becomes like, well, does the state have the right to actually ban that treatment? I mean, they don't allow every treatment. Like, you can't just go give your kid cocaine because that might be good and stimulate them in some way because you're like, I as a parent decided that's good. No, that's illegal. So the state can stop you from doing that, not to mention the federal government. So should the state have to allow these parents to give these treatments is a kind of a question. I guess that's going to go up to the Supreme Court, right?
So the government has a right to step in as a parent under guardian ad litem law, guardian ad litem, if they feel that the parent is neglecting the child. So the government has a right to step in. For example, if your parents are beating you up really bad and the police get called, Department of Social Services is allowed to come in and actually split the parents up and take the kids and put them somewhere else to protect the child.
Right.
So the government could come in if they feel that the parents are causing child neglect or reckless behavior to the child's welfare, mental health, or otherwise. Mm-hmm. So the counter argument to this is there are some doctors that are saying that this is child neglect and child endangerment. You're endangering the child because their position is you're performing these surgeries or you're performing these effects that are going to be long-term. They're going to have long-term effects.
That's the position of many states, by the way.
And the thing is, there's not enough studies to show that there's long-term effects. Additionally, according to 18,000 endocrinologists, they're saying it's reversible. In other words, in theory, you could stop your hormone therapy and your breasts will come back. Your body parts will come back. Now, the counter argument is that
seems really hard to believe.
The counter argument is it won't come back the same. It'll be problematic. You'll have low fertility. There'll be bone density issues. Yeah. Well, so a senator basically put it like you're flying the airplane and building it at the same time.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you know how like in kind of like there's a saying that in life there's like one-way doors and two-way doors. There's doors where you make a decision and you go through and you cannot come back. There's other doors that you can make a decision, go through, and if you don't like it, you come right back. This one seems like if you go through the entire years of development as a child and through puberty or not puberty, depending on how you affect it, seems like a little bit of a one-way door. Like you don't get those years back. So playing devil's advocate, I could see the concern of some states. We know Texas has this concern. The state of Kentucky has this concern. You named a bunch of them. I could see the concern of the state that goes, hey, you know what? If it's an irreversible decision, if it is, I don't know. We don't know for sure what the science is on that, but I could see the concern of the state going, if this is an irreversible decision, maybe we don't allow it for somebody who's too young and maybe we wait till age 18 like we do for other things like smoking, getting tattoos or whatever else, right? Is that kind of the logic the state's coming at it for banning this treatment? They're not just banning it to say, hey, parents, we don't want you to treat your children. They're saying, at some age, it may be premature to do this because you might do irreversible damage and there may not be a way back if they change their mind. And children are impressionable.
Well, according to this, if you look at paragraph 46, 18,000 endocrinologists said what?
Okay, so
what did they say about reversibility?
You're showing me a piece of paper with a highlight that says puberty.
Delaying treatment is reversible. According to this complaint that they filed, 18,000 chronologists believe that the treatment is reversible. They're citing them.
So my next question is, how many endocrinologists don't agree with that?
There's nothing about that here. There's just
I would like to see that number.
There's extreme examples of it saying basically, so if your child wanted to be a pirate, should you take out his eye? One doctor said that. In other words, should we accommodate a child that wants to be a pirate? Should we take out his left eye to accommodate that if he feels that he's going to be depressed and kill himself?
Right, we shouldn't.
Well, so that's the other side of the argument. Like, how far do we go? But this is not really. I mean, how many kids want to be pirates? You know,
right? Of course,
it's not apples to oranges
at all. That's just a hyperbolic.
It's a hyperbolic argument to make a point that they want to make.
I just can understand that the states are saying we think that's not good at a certain age. But I also can understand the parents saying, I really can see the other side. And if I was a parent in that scenario, I could really understand saying, hey, state, like, get out of my business. Because, like, I know what's good for my child. And there's 18,000 endocrinologists who agree with me. Let me give them treatment. I could totally see the parents saying that. I get it. It's a hard issue.
It's a very hard issue, and that's exactly what's going on right now. I think that the people that are opposing it believe that if the law is passed to allow these blockers, then kids could just walk in and just have body parts chopped off, which is not what they're saying.
Right.
But I think a majority of people believe it. And like I admitted to you, I thought there was a possibility before I read this. When I heard on the news, I said, does this mean that a kid could go in and if they feel like they're not a man anymore or a girl anymore, they could just have body parts chopped off? This says no, okay? Right. It says it could be done, but it's extreme. And only and the Dr. McNamara talked about, like, I think it's 0.001%.
Right.
And she said she couldn't even remember based on her experience having it done. So let's talk about 99%. 99% just want to feel normal. They want to feel like a part of their gender, and they just want the blockers to feel like their gender, basically. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So we can dispel the myth of the surgery being a big threat.
That's a political ruse.
Let's not do anything political.
In my opinion.
Let's not do anything political.
Right. Nothing political. Just legal.
Listen, you're a parent. I'm a parent.
Yeah.
We're talking about little kids here.
I don't want to talk like a parent. I'm talking about.
But I'm talking as a parent.
But I'm talking like a lawyer.
Talk like a lawyer.
Okay.
But you still can empathize with having little kids, and like that shouldn't be political. It's about the health of the kids. That's it. No politics.
Yeah.
Nobody really. We're not talking about our politics.
I have no politics. I'm politically atheist.
I don't know what mine are. So getting back to the issue, the kids. We've got one side of the coin saying, don't put chemicals and hormone treatment into that child because of things they're saying to you. They could be wrong, or they could be hallucinating, or they could have a big imagination. Let's wait. And if they're really, really correct, let's do that. That's the Texas government saying that. Then the other side of the coin is the mom and dad going, I'm assuming mom and dad, but parents certainly saying, hey, get out of my business. Like, I know what's good for my kid. My kid goes to school, doesn't fit in, is in the wrong group, needs to go over there. She's saying she's not a boy. I want to give her these hormone treatments.
It's not just
different states are disagreeing on this.
It's not just up to the parent, though. So the law basically says even if the parents agree, the parents can't just walk your kid in and do this. It's not that easy. You have to have therapy for a long time. Average, according to Dr. McNamara, 6 months of therapy, psychological therapy where you're sitting down. You're talking to the therapist. Why do you want to do this? Are you sure you want to do this? You're going over and over. Then there's a consensus of doctors that sit down and they make the recommendation. And with that consensus, then at that point in time, you need legally the guardian ad litem or the parents to say, okay, so there's filters and stages to this. It's not right away. It takes time. In fact, Tony,
you mean to get these treatments? I'm confused. Like, are we talking about the bans or are we talking about the state laws?
The hormone blockers, before you get the hormone blocker,
yes,
you go through a whole bunch of filter. You go through therapy.
Right.
You go through consensus of staff that agree that you should get the therapy, and then ultimately you get the parental consent.
But I'm confused. Okay. Do you mean in the states where it's now banned, where this is an issue? Are you saying there's exceptions to the ban, or are you saying in other states like California?
I'm saying right now in other states like
California.
And in Tennessee also, up until August 1st, you were allowed up until last year, August 21st. They just passed this law saying that whoever was doing it before is grandfathered in, but they're just phasing it out right now.
It's a super new issue for the legislators.
Right.
I think a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the legislators, it wasn't really top of mind. Like, oh my God, this is happening. Now you see Texas, Kentucky, you named a bunch.
And going back to what you said before, in the actual complaint, they list, I think, 14 children of their lives, how they're impacted by this. They're saying, like, one of the kids doesn't want to go to school, another kid wants to commit suicide, another kid stays home and he cries all day. There's all these parents are complaining that, look, even though we don't agree with how they feel and we don't want them to be this other person, we'd rather have them alive. That's what this lawsuit is about. It's the we'd rather have them alive lawsuit, so let us give them what they need.
So it's hard to disagree with that. Is there an opposing? I want to look at all aspects, and I want to steel man the other side to this. Is there a steel man to the other side saying, hey, understood, the suicide rate noted with concern. But there's also a suicide rate associated with doing the transition and not having made the right decision.
That, my friend, there's not a lot of stats on that about people that regret. It's very, very low from my understanding. So if you're wondering, does anybody regret?
I want to know the percentage.
There's not a lot of stats on it, but the majority, according to Dr. Meredith McNamara, according to the stats that we have, there is like 90% something success rate, where 99% or something of them are happier after the therapy than they were before the therapy.
Doesn't that seem high? Because you hear so many stories of people. There's detransitioners. It's like a movie, a documentary. It's in media. Like you see it in
small percentage, and that's being polarized because of the press. And
I'm sure about that, but. Is there a side presenting data opposite this data? Or is it just a lack of data on the other side?
I mean, let me ask you this. If there was, would this doctor make a stupid comparison saying, well, if the kid wanted to be a pirate, would you take out his eye? I mean, that's the best that they have as far as a response is concerned.
No, let's
Don't
put
you
that
think they would
aside.
have data on? Don't you think they'd back it up with data saying, by the way, we did it on these children before and it was irreversible? They haven't filed an opposition citing any examples where it's irreversible or where there's some long-term effect. This is just theory that they're saying that it's not reversible and we don't know about any long-term. It's all theory at this point. And like I said, it's like an airplane that's already flying in the sky and you're building it as you're going along. We won't know about this until a little later on, which is the counter argument. You want the steel man it. The other side is saying you're going too quick. We don't know what's going to happen to these kids. So why don't we slow the train down before we start giving them these hormone blockers? But the parents are now saying, we don't have time for that. You don't give these hormone blockers. My kids might not be around. My kid might not be around next year.
Okay, I could see that. I mean, I understand the... every time it gets bootstrapped to suicide, it kind of elevates the issue and makes it not even really about gender identity, not even really about gender dysphoria.
It is about gender.
It turns it into a suicide issue.
No, it doesn't, because it's a mental disorder. So gender dysphoria is a mental disorder, and if there's a mental disorder and we want to alleviate the disorder, then we have to do what we need to do. And if there's suicidal tendencies, as your wife, who's a social worker, knows, you do what you can, whatever you can, to save the person's life first and foremost. Number one.
Yeah.
And all these parents are saying, look, if it's not going to harm my child to take these puberty things that make the body stop growing in certain areas.
There's no way it's not going to harm the child's biological body. There's no way.
I don't have any.
Right.
And I don't either. I'm only telling you what the lawyers are saying.
My medical degree is super sus, meaning non-existent. But I think that just from having been a parent and whatever limited expertise that gives me on speaking about children developing and their bodies changing over time and growing into young adults, which I've done with multiple children of both genders, let's say, I've raised. It's hard to imagine that the hormonal changes that take place during puberty, the chemical changes, the muscle mass that changes because of hormonal feedback loops, the tendon strength, the thickness of all the physical changes that hormones drive throughout the period of years of development as the kid is now, taller and bigger. It's hard to undo that. You don't get the time back. You can't really reverse the clock in aging or in child development.
Well, you're now testifying to medical.
I'm not a doctor.
I'm not an expert.
So I'm putting
either, so
this is a parental opinion.
Okay, that's a parental opinion.
Of just watching kids grow up.
But
so I would be. So listen, let me side with the parents. Again, I'm not taking a side. I can really steelman their case, which is, hey, as a parent, it must be really important to do this if you choose to do it to your child, because no parent would deny that it's a huge biological impact on the body. So it must be really important to make that decision. I mean, just to take their point of view, that child must be suffering in the social setting in a big way.
Yeah.
To make that biological change to the body.
Right. And another example is the change that you're talking about. So there are some women that suffer what they call polycystic ovarian cancer. And in those cases, they give testosterone supplements, testosterone to the female for therapy. And in those cases, I don't see anything that show there was an irreversible effect by giving them testosterone. So maybe you're right. Maybe at some point when we have this study that says, whoa, we got to stop doing this because there's irreversible effects that would change things. But at this point in time, according to Dr. Meredith McNamara, who's an endocrinologist, pediatrician, she deals with these types of things. I'm going to defer to the experts. If she says there's an irreversible effect, if 18,000 endocrinologists say that, who are you and I to say otherwise?
If you learned that it was irreversible in some way, partially irreversible, would it change your opinion? Partially irreversible.
Well, now you're changing 1 + 1 to 1 + 2.
If
it's
it
a
was
different mathematical formula.
The science isn't settled.
So my follow-up would be, what are the effects that you're talking about that are irreversible? Are we talking about you lose one strand of hair? No big deal.
Fair.
Okay. Are you talking about your bones aren't going to grow, your density, and you're going to have osteoporosis and you're going to have problems? I need to know that. It depends on what the side effect is.
Fair question.
Everything has side effects.
Fair question.
Go pop a Tylenol. It'll say on there what the side effects are.
100% agree. But I mean, at the same time, just to rewind for 1 second, I agree with what you're saying that maybe they'll find out there's not irreversible effects. Maybe, but my common sense tells me at least some of the effects are irreversible. And can I just ask, isn't that the point? The point is to make an irreversible change. You're trying to transition a child's biological sex to match their identity. Is that better, or is it better to try to change their identity to match their biological sex?
Technically, you're not changing it. You're suppressing it. There's a big difference. You're suppressing it. You can't really change it permanently. All you could do is hold back the horses. And as soon as you stop the injections, the horses come back. So the horses are there in the stable.
If a young boy is about to turn into a man, you chemically stop that from happening.
You're suppressing it from happening. All right.
And as long as you just keep the pressure on, that doesn't happen. But one day, if you take your foot off the gas, it may just happen.
That's what this doctor is saying. I'm a lawyer. Again, I don't know. But people are going to be emailing us saying, you guys are idiots. You guys don't know what you're talking about.
We're not giving medical advice.
We're not. I'm not.
I'm curious.
I'm only telling you what this says is basically they're saying if you could give a girl testosterone treatment for polycystic ovarian cancer, why can't our kids who are about to kill themselves get the same kind of treatment? That's the argument.
Okay.
Make sense?
It totally makes sense. I get their argument.
I don't want those kids to die.
I don't either.
I agree with that. Well, that choice is not the issue. If a child is going to die, right, and you're telling me we could save that child by giving him an itty-bitty shot.
It's a big if. It's a big if. We can't just slide so easily into if a child is going to die.
Again, assuming that all of the filters have been done, they met with the psychiatrist, they met with the doctors, they've gone through the therapy. If the professionals make that recommendation, I'm going to defer to the professionals.
I got you.
I'm not a doctor.
Okay.
And all I'm telling you, the law, now how the law kicks into place, my job is to tell you why it's illegal to do that, because I see their perspective. If you're helping a girl with polycystic cancer get testosterone, why can't my child who's trans get the same kind of blocker to stop him from killing himself?
Gotcha.
That's the argument. And logically speaking, I understand the argument.
That's the argument parents are making in states like Texas, say, where they're trying to ban this treatment. And not in California, because in California, you can still go through these hoops and go sort of check the mark. Well, how do I say that? You correctly pointed out that in California, which allows these treatments still, it has not been banned. Unlike Texas, Kentucky, and these other states, in California, there's still a lot of safeguards. There's a lot of safeguards in place to stop the wrong kid from doing these treatments, or to stop parents from sort of like, would you say unjustly having kids do these treatments?
Yeah.
Enough guardrails?
Protocol. There's protocol and procedure, right? So once these laws pass, they're not going to just willy-nilly allow people to do things. They're going to pass safeguards and protocols and procedures that you need to do. Does that mean? And also another reason why this law is dangerous is because these parents are saying they literally have to drive to another state to get that care. So you better hope that your parents could afford to move to that state, because these other kids that are stuck there, they're isolated and they can't get that same care. So it affects America entirely because they're violating the Equal Protection Clause. They're violating the 14th Amendment, which is the right to be heard, an opportunity to be heard and notice. And they're saying, you just can't take this away from me arbitrarily like that. You can't just give it to one girl who's got the cancer and then say no to me. If you think she's going to die and the ovarian cancer, I'm going to die because I'm not going to be around next year because I don't want to live anymore.
Right.
And that's, now, the counter argument you were saying is, Okay, from the other side is, okay, we understand that. Let them just get therapy. Maybe we could change their minds. Maybe we could get them to change their mind about disassociating themselves, about who they identify themselves. But there's no stats on that. We don't have any therapy for that. So I don't know what they're talking about.
Like the journalist Andrew Sullivan would say, I think a smart thinker on these issues and a openly gay man, he would say that, yeah, let them have some time to think about what that identity is, because they might just be a gay boy. And that's why they might just have these effeminate kind of tendencies or these, and people like Andrew Sullivan, and I'm not sort of like, I don't know whether he's right or wrong, but I do want to, I do think it's an interesting perspective to put on the table, which is like that perspective is that you might be using chemicals and hormones to change somebody biologically, meaning the physical body,
right.
Whereas psychologically, you might have more work to do, or you might have more ground to gain, and they might just be a gay boy.
That's the counter argument. However, the law is basically saying, although that may be true, we have a crisis right now because these kids in the immediate future are going to suffer irreparable harm or injury. Those are the magic words. In other words, we got people at plate. If this is a baseball game, they're up at bat right now. They're going to be pitched to swing. And if we don't get them their medication, their hormone blockers, they're going to be gone. They're not going to be in the game.
And we have the
we got to act now.
But so that's a big threat. I feel the threat of that. That's scary as hell. If I'm a parent, and I'm scared of that.
Right.
And my question is, do the stats show that in the suicide statistics? Is that real? Is that a real threat? Are all those kids, or many of those kids, or a high proportion of those kids going to commit suicide? Is that committing suicide
or depression?
Is the committing suicide or depression?
Serious depression.
Okay, but those are like, we're in two different ballparks there. Like,
no, but I mean, they list that as a part of it. Should these children be tortured and live in depression, serious depression?
Well, what if you have to go, I gotta steel man the other side of this. Yep. What if you have to go through some depression to realize that you're gay and that you're actually a little effeminate for a boy, or vice versa?
Well, these parents have cited 15 children, and they've cited examples of why they're going through depression. And every parent has cited in the argument that their child will commit suicide. They've threatened suicide, and they fear suicide. 15 parents in this complaint. So maybe other parents don't feel that way, but these specific parents, these are the people that need help. Okay. I'm not saying that the majority of other parents
that.
Maybe other parents are handling it.
That's a good data point.
Right.
So there's 15 parents who are in the complaint. All have certified and authorized or via signed affidavit or so forth that their children will commit suicide.
Or they believe in good faith that they believe it will go there if these blockers aren't given. Correct.
Fair.
Yes.
If a parent did not believe that, would they be in the complaint?
No.
So therefore, it's a self-selecting group. It's anecdotal. We cannot use it as evidence.
That doesn't make it unconstitutional. You could have one person self-selecting. Everything's self-selecting.
I understand, but it's no indication of a mass epidemic of suicide amongst these kids. We need better stats than according 15 parents.
According to this lawsuit, there's thousands. There's, I think, 1,400. That's a stat. 1,400 trans children that are being denied right now, according to Dr. McNamara, of these blockers. 1,400 that she knows, and she said it's going to dramatically increase because more people are coming forward now out of the woodwork and saying, "Me too." Basically, I also need that as well.
But
she believes it's going to increase in the future. So right now we have 1,400 people at bat. That's not a small number. I know.
Let's not talk about the people who are at bat. Let's talk about the people who already went to bat. How many of them committed suicide? What's the percentage? That's the number.
Almost nothing.
Okay, so then why are we concerned that the ones at bat will?
We're not.
But the ones that went before, this isn't a new issue. We've had trans kids before. We've historically had trans kids.
We have,
we should have suicide rate numbers of those.
It's very small.
Of those who did
according to Dr. Meredith McNamara from Yale University, it's very small if they get the treatment.
Okay, but I'm asking about if
after
they
the treatment. I don't know what the stats are.
I'm asking about if they're denied.
I don't know what the stats are.
Right? Because that's the issue at hand.
I don't know, but I think the argument is one's too many.
Well,
and there are thousands of trans kids out there, and they have these feelings, and that's not even the issue. You're jumping the issue, so that's not the issue. The issue is if you give it to a girl with cystic ovarian cancer, why can't you give that same therapy to another child that's about to commit immediate suicide or have irreparable harm?
Yeah.
So both of them have cancer. One has cancer of the body, the other has cancer of the mind, in a sense, right? Let's argue. That kid that's got the cancer disorder of gender disorder, dysphoria, he's saying, I can't take this. I'm miserable. You're not going to give me that needle to make me feel like the way I think I should feel. I don't want to live anymore. So these parents are like, please stop. Don't let my kid commit suicide. That's what this is all about. It's not about these other parents that are fine with their trans kids. We're talking about the trans kids that are in deep, deep trouble right now. And why is it coming forward now? Why are we hearing about the lawsuits? This has been a progression for years, Tony. It's been going on for like maybe 1970, 1980, slowly. Everything in civil rights takes time, right? How long did it take for the civil rights movement? It took years and years. How long for the Equal Rights Amendment for women? Years and years. This is a culmination of years and years of the trans movement. And now we're at the point where people are actually the ACLU is stepping forward and filing these cases.
Let's break that part down for people, because this to me is so awesome and so fascinating. The evolution of the system we live in, the evolution of our democracy, of our legal system. I'm so fascinated by how the Constitution lives and breathes and changes over time. I mean, I remember studying about equal protection. You want to get into equal protection, so let's get into it. How we didn't have any protected classes until the amendment to the Constitution, was it the 14th, came around and said, yo, we're going to create, the Supreme Court created this, right? A protected class.
Yes.
And it was African Americans, right? It was or any ethnicity or origin. Maybe they threw religion in there right early on, or religion came later. I can't really remember.
Well, the first thing was suspect classification, which means that if you're based on race, nationality, religion, that's the top of the pyramid.
These are big, right?
So suspect classification. When you say suspect, you're saying these are absolute rights,
right?
For people with religion, whether you're a Jewish, Muslim. You can't be discriminated based on that.
But let's back up, because I want people to understand what we're even talking about, which is in the Constitution, right?
Right.
Is the 14th Amendment, right?
Yes.
Says that
underneath it,
there should be equal protection under the law. We call it, in the legal world, it's the Equal Protection Clause, and it says that, like, a state, for example, cannot pass a law that says African Americans cannot go into this bathroom. They have to go into this bathroom,
right? Because
that on its face discriminates a protected class, which is race, ethnicity, national origin, religion.
Yes.
I'm not throwing gender in there. There's a reason I'm not saying gender.
Yeah, that's right. Not yet. Right.
No, I can't throw it in there because it started with these protected classes of race.
That's right.
I love that it evolved. I'm not saying I love that it evolved.
But that
starts and then gets better.
But what's interesting is that's the most important. And then there's something below. There's something below suspect, and that's middle tier scrutiny, which means that quasi suspect. I want to call
it
quasi suspect. So it's gender is one of them. Yeah. It's not as high as race.
Right. So can I give an example? So if the law, instead of saying African Americans can't go into this bathroom, only whites, and they have to go in this one, that's obviously you're taking a very suspect law and you're applying scrutiny to it, strict scrutiny, right?
Yeah.
And you're destroying that law. If you're the Constitutional Court, if you're the Supreme Court, you're like, hey, Texas, you can't do that. That law's gone. But if the law says men cannot go into this bathroom, they can only go here. Women have to go here, right? If the law says
you analyze it in a different way. You don't analyze it under strict scrutiny, which means under strict scrutiny, the government must show the challenge classification serves a compelling state interest. That's the magic word, compelling state interest. And that the classification is not necessary to serve that interest. With middle tier scrutiny, which is what you use for quasi, the difference is the government must show that the challenge classification serves an important state interest. So the difference is one is compelling, the other one is important. So if you're talking about male, you go here, and female, you go here, then the courts analyze whether there was an important a middle tier important interest that was being served by doing that. Now, if you're talking about black and white, you're black, you got to go here, you got to go white, you got to go here. Now the government's got to show that there was a compelling state interest, which is almost impossible to freaking show. Yeah. What are you going to say? Hey, the black guy needs to go here because fill in the blank. How does that work?
Well, it
doesn't work. That's why it never wins.
We've evolved as a society now, and we sit here in this sort of advanced state of our and we have a lot of work to do, but we've evolved to this point where you and I can say that and look at it and go, that's ridiculous.
Right.
That a black man would have to go here and a white man. But
Right.
not that many years ago, that was actually the law. It was actually the law.
Right.
Literally, many states had those laws, segregation laws.
Separate but equal.
Until the U.S. Constitutional Court, I'm going to call them, the Supreme Court came in and said, no,
Yeah.
no more. Like, we're creating a protected class for
Right.
African Americans and people of other origin, ethnicity, and you cannot have a law on its face that discriminates against that. But for gender, let's call it, I'm going to say sex, because it's not, in my mind, it's less accurate to say gender, but sex, biological sex, male, female, XYXX. They can have laws that discriminate because I guess we reasonably understand under the law that there's reasons for that difference. It doesn't make sense to have a reason to have a difference between a black man or a white man, but between a man and a woman, there are important differences, and therefore let's keep the bathroom separate for many reasons. Okay.
Right.
So then we've talked about strict scrutiny up here in the suspect class, and then middle tier, there's another one.
The lowest tier is rational basis. So, for example, if there's taxation or something like that, you could use a rational basis analysis.
Yes.
And that would be for things like, is it lawful to raise your taxes? Is it lawful to, I don't know.
No, but discriminatory, like, and
Oh, minimum security.
what about sexual preference? Isn't it a lower level of scrutiny?
No, but there's minimum security, which applies to all classifications other than those above. And just so you know, it's a slightly closer scrutiny. It basically involves the state interest may be applied, for example, in cases involving disadvantaged mentally retarded people, homosexuals, or even innocent children of illegal aliens. So that would be a minimum scrutiny test.
So
Yes.
homosexuality. Am I correct that under the current constitutional framework, it certainly doesn't get strict scrutiny because it's not race.
No.
It doesn't. Does it get middle tier? Has it upgraded to middle tier, or is it still rational basis?
It's not a quasi-suspect classification.
So it's still kind of
minimum security.
Minimum security. So minimum
scrutiny. We keep saying security.
So
Scrutiny.
to all our gay friends out there, it's minimum security. No, just kidding.
Scrutiny.
Minimum scrutiny.
So we want to scrutinize the law with minimum application for those that have issues regarding, for example, mental retardation, homosexuality, innocence of children of illegal aliens. There's some argument, should the rational basis test be applied to this? Or another type of test apply to this?
I wonder if the mainstream argument in society is should homosexuality be elevated in scrutiny up to that middle tier along with gender, like along with sex, man, female. I don't know. Maybe not, because, and I'm just again, just spitballing here just for fun to discuss it. Is that your biological sex, whether you're a man or a woman, is so ingrained in you, in your physical body. It's really a physical thing that creates physical differences, necessitating a different bathroom. Whereas this other idea of homosexuality being a preference in your mind, right, of who you love and who you want to, it's not a physical thing where why would the law have to apply for a non-physical issue? I'm just thinking out loud. Maybe there's a reason why you wouldn't need scrutiny on that. I'm just trying to understand why the Constitution, or maybe we'll get there.
Well, that's a completely different podcast.
Okay. Can I just say one thing though? In this evolution from race getting strict scrutiny, and then biological sex, gender getting that mid-level scrutiny under the law. You know how we evolved? Like, we kept adding classes.
Yeah.
I found it fascinating and the brilliance of the legal argument that actually brought gay rights under the Constitution. If you remember, I want to remind people of how brilliant this was, because as I was watching this develop in the news, and this was many years ago now, maybe 10 years ago, I'm throwing off the top of my head, there was definitely protected classes for race. There was protected classes for gender. There was not for LGBTQ. There was not for gay people. There wasn't. And then I was watching the legal arguments in the constitutional case which gave them those rights. And the legal argument was made that, hey, you can discriminate against a man who wants to, it was about gay marriage. And one side said, hey, Bob wants to marry Harry, and you should not be able to stop him and say marriage is between a man and a woman because you're discriminating against Bob because he's gay. Okay, that's what they said. And the court kind of came back and said, you know what? You can discriminate against them because they're gay. That's not a protected class. We do have race and we do have sex. Try again. And the legally brilliant minds came back and said, oh, okay, Bob wants to marry Harry. You cannot discriminate against him because you're discriminating on him based on the fact that he's a man. You're discriminating against him because he's a man.
Okay.
What I want you to see if you can follow my point.
Yeah.
Okay. Race is a protected class.
Yes. Yes.
Sex is a protected class.
Yes.
Sexual preference was not. But they won the case using sex instead.
Which case are you referring to?
The case that established gay rights across the United States.
Okay. I'd have to look it up.
Should we look it up?
Sure. I wasn't ready for that. Didn't think we were going to talk about that, but sure.
But my only point with that is that sexual preference wasn't the protected class that they used to bring gay marriage under the equal protection clause.
I didn't research it, honestly. I didn't research it. So I think you're talking about Obergefell versus Hodges, 2015. Yeah, that's the case you're talking about. I'm not familiar with that. It says Obergefell versus Obergefell versus Hodges. That's a United States case, 2014. It says that they shared a landmark decision in which they ruled a fundamental right to marry is guaranteed by the Equal Protection Clause. That's what you're talking about. That's what you're talking about.
Which case did you say?
Obergefell. Yeah.
Obergefell and Hodges.
I wasn't familiar with that case until you brought it up.
And it comes through the 14th Amendment through the Equal Protection Clause. And
yeah.
What I'm saying was so fascinating about that case is you would have thought it would have come through sexual preference as the protected class, but it doesn't. That's what I was trying to say to you. It was kind of a mind F. Like, okay. Harry wants to marry Bob. Follow me for a second. Yeah. I want you to follow this because it was literally in the Supreme Court arguments that I read the transcripts of. Harry wants to marry Bob, right?
Yeah.
We should not stop that because that's his sexual preference and you should not discriminate against gay people, right?
Yeah.
Wrong. That's not the argument they used. They said you should not stop that because you're doing it because he's a man. If he was a woman, you'd allow the marriage, but he's a man. They used sex as the door to get through to pass equal protection for homosexuals. That's all I'm saying.
I didn't read the case. I can't tell you. I'll rely on your opinion. I didn't read it. I'm sorry.
It's just what I remember.
Okay.
I thought it was cool from a legal argument standpoint, and it gets to this idea of who's a protected class. Or is sexual preference a protected class currently?
I have no idea.
Okay. So, but this entire case,
sexual preference meaning what? Being homosexual?
Yeah. Can there be laws that discriminate against homosexuals?
No.
Because
there's the Hobby Lobby case. The Hobby Lobby case made that clear.
Right. And it did.
Honestly, I wasn't prepared to start talking about homosexual laws.
Do you know which?
I'm only here to talk about this trans. I didn't do any research.
But doesn't it tie together? Because it's what level of scrutiny do you give it?
No, it's not tied in together. It's not tied in together at all. Trans has nothing to do with homosexuality. It's a complete. They're one's talking about
that's
Medicare.
True.
We're only talking about Medicare, and you're talking about sexual rights. It's two different things. We're just talking about gender-affirming care.
Right.
Sorry, I wasn't ready for that.
No, but listen,
I'm only focusing on the gender-affirming care.
Right, but listen, there's privacy rights at stake. There's fundamental rights at stake for all of these questions, and they all come in through the Equal Protection Clause, like fundamental rights, right to your liberty, privacy.
Yes.
Of course, those are going to come into a debate about trans children, whether they could get treatment. Right? Like, is it the right of the parent? Is it a privacy thing, fundamental rights? Or is it strictly coming in through this other thing we were talking about? You said equal protection, right? How does it come in under equal protection?
What specifically?
The case we're talking about with trans kids.
Oh, how does this fall under equal protection? Oh, it's really simple because they're, like I told you, if a girl with polycystic cancer could get it and she's got the testosterone blockers, why can't the other kids get it? That's the equal protection violation.
Okay, but it's
That's
only an equal protection violation if you have a protected class. What's the protected class?
They're trying to be a protected class. They're trying to raise them so that they use heightened security. That's what they're saying.
How would you define the protected class in their argument?
In their argument? All right.
Yeah.
Flitch, I'll tell
Well,
you.
because that's what I'm trying to figure out, because we talked about race.
Okay.
We talked about sex. I was trying to talk about sexual preference. You don't really want to go there. But
it's not that I don't
what is this protected class? What is it? Like, if the Supreme Court's going to say you can't pass a law that discriminates against this protected class, is it people with gender dysphoria, I'm going to assume?
Yes.
Or we could say trans people, but
No, it's the protected class would be the people that have gender dysphoria. But no, hold on, let me confirm that. Hold on, you're throwing a lot of questions at me. Give me a second. Give me a second. Oh. Studies found that as many as 40% of transgender people have attempted suicide at some point in their lives. You wanted to know what the stats on that were? So it's 40%. These are people that haven't got the treatment. 40% have tried to commit suicide. And as far as what class, I'll tell you right now.
you're saying 40% of people who
Have not received it.
are trans and need treatment and have not received it.
Yep, according to the lawsuit, yeah. And according to this,
40%.
okay, so it's complicated. All right.
Can I?
So here's the answer to the question. It's a long answer. So
Go for it.
you asked me, are they protected class? According to this, the lawsuit basically says discrimination based on transgender and sex is subject to heightened security under equal protection and is therefore presumptively unconstitutional.
Boom.
A demanding burden of justification upon the state to provide at least an exceedingly persuasive justification for the different treatment. It further says that transgender people have obvious, immutable, and distinguishing characteristics that define that class as a discrete group. These characteristics bear no relation to transgender people's abilities to perform in or contribute to society. So to answer your question, they're trying to establish a separate group for transgender people. They're saying that they're a discrete group, and this is based on the fact that they have obvious, immutable, and distinguishing characteristics, and therefore it should be protected under equal protection and subject to heightened security.
Got it.
Scrutiny.
Got it. That actually makes perfect sense. So that's the argument there is let's create a new protected class. Like we don't have them in the law.
They're trying to carve it out.
I get that. Like we didn't have African Americans as a protected class. We didn't have women as a protected class. We got them along the way because we evolved. And this filing is saying to the Supreme Court of the U.S., hey, let's bring in transgender people as a protected class. I get that. And you know, the argument about immutable characteristics is very interesting and I think pretty persuasive. But I think they're going to have to prove the science. They're going to have to convince the Supreme Court next fall that, what are they going to have to convince them?
Well, they're going to have to convince them that the ban requires the plaintiff to discriminate against adolescents based on their sex. And what they're saying here is that this places the provider and the plaintiff in an untenable position of either violating the law, which is where I come in, it becomes criminal, either violating Section 1157 of the Federal American Care Act, which is the Obamacare, by refusing to provide care to transgender adolescents, or violating the Tennessee healthcare ban by continuing to provide care for transgender adolescents. So essentially, if you keep doing this, it's going to become a crime. And they're saying you're discriminating against these adolescents strictly because of their sex.
But it's not because they're sex; it's because of being transgender, and that's not sex. Are we going to say
It says here, the ban thus requires provider plaintiff to discriminate against adolescents on the basis of their sex.
Okay.
So it sounds to me like it's both. It's also the gender identity, but they're also putting their sex, because like I said, if you give it to a girl that's got polycystic ovarian cancer and you're giving her testosterone treatments, they're saying, well, why can't you give the same testosterone treatments to somebody with gender dysphoria.
It's interesting because the Texas Supreme Court looked at that exact issue and they ruled a different way. Did you get a chance to look at the Texas Supreme Court?
No.
Like different Supreme Courts have ruled on this, which is why it's going to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. I wonder how much the U.S. Supreme Court will mirror or be different from the Texas Supreme Court. Because I read the Texas Supreme Court decision this morning before coming over here. They looked at the Texas ban. Okay, the ban on transgender care, let's call it the 3 categories, really 2, right?
Yeah.
Hormone therapy, puberty blockers, in
Yeah.
very, very rare cases, surgery. We don't even have to get into that.
Yeah.
Texas passed a law that banned that. It said, you can't do this for people under 18. I don't care what the parents want, okay? And the parents sued and said, screw you, get out of our lives. What happened to freedom in Texas? Like, I get to do what I want with my kids, right? That's what the Texas parents said. It went all the way to the Texas Supreme Court. The Texas Supreme Court said, there's no protected class here. We have protected class of race. We have protected class of sex. Thank you for making the argument that we're discriminating based on sex with this law, but we're not. You want to know why we're not? Because a transgender boy is banned and a transgender girl is banned from getting this treatment. So we're not really doing it based on sex, gender. It's interesting that the Texas Supreme Court made that decision. So you're saying in this filing to the U.S. Supreme Court, they're asking the U.S. Supreme Court to go a different way to say, hey, this is discrimination on sex.
Is the one in Texas being sued under the Affordable Health Care Act? Do you know if that's inside the lawsuit? Because that makes a huge difference.
Affordable? I don't know.
So
don't know.
This is being brought to the U.S. Supreme Court because it's saying it's violating the Affordable Health Care Act, which is the federal law that Obama passed, saying that if you guys need help, we'll give you help. We'll let you get the health care that you need. Now they're suing and saying, no, you violated that. You're not giving me the affordable health care that I need. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's going to the Supreme Court based on that statute. They're saying you're violating, if all the legal geeks want to know, the lawsuit's claiming that this law is a violation of Section 1157 of the Affordable Health Care Act. So under the 1157 of the Affordable Health Care Act, what does it say? It says an individual shall not, on the ground prohibited under this section, be discriminated on the basis of sex. So it says it right there. You can't be discriminated on the basis of sex. And it says you cannot be denied any benefits or subjected to discrimination under any healthcare program or any activity or be denied any financial assistance by the federal government, including credits, subsidies, or contacts or insurance. So basically they're saying you're blocking me from getting what I'm entitled to, my rights, just like that girl with the ovarian cancer. I'm sick too. I may not have the same sickness as her. I got a different sickness. Why aren't you allowing me to get the shots?
Okay, I'm with you. I'm 100% with you.
I'm not saying I'm with them. I'm only explaining.
I get what you just said. Okay. 100%.
Everybody's gonna be like, oh, they're both trans pro.
No.
They're both left wingers. You know.
I get the complaint that this is discriminating based on sex.
Yeah.
But follow me here. That same complaint was made in Texas by parents. Right. It went all the way to the Supreme Court of Texas. And here's what the Supreme Court of Texas said. It said, yeah, we have an equal protection clause in the Texas Constitution. And here's what it says.
Most states do.
You cannot discriminate. You cannot deny equality because of a person's membership in a protected class of, hear me out, sex, race, color, creed, it goes on. Sex. So we have that in Texas, is what Texas says. But we've applied this framework to the complaints of the parents, and we conclude that this ban does not deny equality under the law because of membership in a protected class. And here's why. Texas's Supreme Court says this law discriminates against transgender people. But that is not necessarily sex discrimination. That's what the Texas Supreme Court.
Well, I think the U.S. Supreme Court is going to parse that.
That's interesting, right?
I'm going to see whether or not they agree with that.
Absolutely. I wonder if
because I think you can't disconnect one without the other.
But I just want you to hear Texas argument, and you can tear it apart. Okay. Maybe you'll disagree with it, but right. I want to feed it to you because I find it interesting. The statute treats both males and females receiving treatment for gender dysphoria the same. it prohibits medical providers from prescribing or supplying cross-sex hormone therapy or these treatments that conflict with the child's sex at birth. It prohibits those, right? It's a ban. But it treats both males and females the same. It bans both of them from getting treatment for their gender dysphoria before a certain age. It's an age limit. In a way, it's like a driver's license. You can't do this till you're 16. It's hard to say that's sex discrimination because it bans girls and boys from driving until they're 16. Texas is saying, and maybe I'm helping their argument a little too much here, but they're saying we're banning boys and girls from doing this till they're 18. We're not just banning boys and we're not just banning girls. So you're not going to get in to the Equal Protection Clause of Texas through sex. So you get what I'm saying. So either, correct me if I'm wrong, either the United States Supreme Court has to say, Texas Supreme Court was wrong, this is sex discrimination, or they have to say, Texas was right. This is not sex discrimination, but we're going to create a new protected class, and that's going to be transgender people. And I think that's what they're going to do.
I think they have to do that because they're not going to win on the sex argument, because that argument, obviously, the Texas could prevail on that technical argument.
They kill it. They kill it with that sex.
I'm not really sure if that's intellectual dishonesty, that ruling, or not, or whether it's good faith ruling.
Well, don't you think on its face it doesn't discriminate based on sex, right? Unless you say transgender is a sex.
Legally speaking, you're right. But if they argue or carve out, if the Supreme Court for the first time says that transgender people have obvious, immutable, and distinguishing characteristics that define them as a distinct, discrete group, then they could actually carve out a separate type of
a new
protected classification of people,
which would be historic. We haven't had that in a long since women or since sexual preference.
Homosexuality was same-sex marriages came through.
But remember what I said about that, and you can go Google me later. It didn't come through same-sex as homosexuality. They did the flip of what Texas did here. They tricked the decision using sex.
Tricked.
Yeah, we don't want to beat a dead horse. I was talking about Harry wants to marry Bob. They didn't win on the argument that Harry's gay and you're discriminating against him. They won on the argument that Harry's a man and you're discriminating against him.
Okay.
Because if he was a woman, he could marry Bob, but he's a man and he can't. So it wasn't the sexual preference. It was actually the sex, the biological sex. Here, for Texas is doing that in the inverse way. It's upholding the ban using sex. It's just interesting. Well, we're going to get a new protected class, I think.
I think so too. I think we're going to get a new protected class. It's going to be under probably quasi or
interesting
quasi-suspect classification.
Okay.
It depends what the Supreme Court wants to do about it. And remember, there's politics behind it too. Who's going to be writing the opinions? Most of the Supreme Court justices are really conservative justices.
Is this real? Is it? I hear you. I want to think.
I don't think it'll be political. I'll tell you why. Because even those conservative justices are all about the 14th Amendment, and they're constitutional conservative justices. And even though it may go against their societal thinking and cultural politics, I think they'll legally do the right thing, even though they don't agree with it. Right. Because you got to come to the conclusion, listen, if there's a discrete, different class of people, and these people are in danger of irreparable harm, you got to give them, you got to carve out something for them to be protected. If it truly is what they're saying it is. And I'm not saying it's as bad. I'm saying if 18,000 endocrinologists are saying these kids are 1,400 people are going to die and 40% of them have suicidal tendencies, then that's a problem that we got to address. So should we protect those people? That's the issue for SCOTUS.
Yes, and look, as the average man on the street, my instinct is yes, we should. We should create that protected class. It just seems fair. It seems fair, like logically, commonsensically, not overthinking, just fair that if you passed a law that discriminated against this new protected class of trans, it would get quasi-suspect scrutiny. There would have to be an important state interest to do that, as opposed to compelling. And therefore...
And there is an important interest.
You would have to show, hey, man, like...
These people are going to commit suicide. That's important enough.
Hold on. But wait, we're talking about the ban, though. We're talking about the ban. The ban. not
ban
the
itself.
law.
Yes.
But the ban, you'd have to, if they wanted to ban it, Texas would then have to bring some data and say, RJ, we saw all the data on the suicides on that side, but check this out. There's actually suicides on the other side of the
Yes,
ledger.
that's the counter. If they have that. I don't know
If they have that,
I didn't see that stat though.
I don't know,
I
but
see the stats on their side. I see the pro stats saying 40% are killing themselves. I didn't see the stats on the other side.
right. So if Texas doesn't have that, the ban goes away. SCOTUS made the right choice. If
Right.
Texas has that, there's an important state interest. The ban is upheld. SCOTUS made the right choice. So hopefully this is what happens.
Right. That's a pretty good breakdown. That's exactly what's going to happen. If this, then that. If, that's what's going to work. If
That works. It's just great for our country. It just means that we're evolved. We got this new protected class. Like we keep getting, as we need them, newer protected classes.
even just to calm people down, because they're going to say, oh my God, these two guys are advocating, body mutilation. That's not what we're saying.
Not at all. We dispelled that myth.
We did. And the thing is, if this law passes, there's going to be safeguards. Just like you can't throw somebody in an insane asylum. I can't just grab you and put you in a mental hospital.
Right.
But I can.
I'm close.
Legally, I can. If I take my time with it, I could be your conservator. I could get the government to believe that you're not well, but it takes time.
Right.
It's not easy to lock somebody up in a conservatorship.
Right.
But there are safeguards and procedures, but you can do it. So for example, let's just say your dad, he needs to be in a conservatorship, is crazy and is hurting your mom, and you're very concerned. You could take over. You could force him to go inside a hospital. But that's not easy to do. The same thing with these trans kids. It's not easy to give them the beta blockers or to give them the hormone blockers, excuse me. There's procedures. So what I want everybody to know is once this law is passed, it doesn't mean there's a free-for-all where all these kids are going to line up and they're just going to get testosterone and estrogen therapy without anybody saying anything. That's not how it's going to happen. The data's not going to break.
It's sad because my dad actually really liked you when he met you.
Okay.
He's
not gonna like
I'm going to let him know what your assessment of him was. All right, man. We'll be watching this. It's next fall. I think this was an intense and interesting breakdown. Fascinating. I mean, this is a cultural touch point in this country, and
Yeah.
it's going to go right in front of SCOTUS's desk. So
Yes.
we'll be watching it.
We'll revisit it, yeah.